this is an email from sort of a little while back from Roy talking about writing music that one loves. So the email says, not only is it more enjoyable to work on, again, he's talking about writing music that one loves, but oftentimes what we love is no longer being written in the same style or approach. In addition, if one really loves a certain kind of style, I think mirroring it also helps to ensure that the song quality is stronger. My example is that because some of my favorite groups no longer exist, when I come up with a better than average melody, I often hear it in that style. For example, I really enjoy power pop. Badfinger is no longer recording, yet some of my songs approximate that style. The way I do it isn't to necessarily try to come up with a Badfinger song, but a lot of times, perhaps you are this way also, is that when I hear a melody in my head, it's often easily identifiable with a certain group. And because much of the music that I listen to is from the 1970s, like the Raspberries and Badfinger and the Beatles before that, I think it's helpful in having a frame of reference of where to go with what I'm hearing. So, the central idea that he's putting forward here, which I think is right on the money, is to write music that one loves. And he sort of goes on to make some has some examples and sort of an argument for why he thinks this is a good idea, or at least why it works for him. And I think this is a great point and worth expounding on. And one of the reasons I thought this was a good episode to read this one is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I chose to open with this song just because I'm like, you know what? You know, I make no secret that Vertical Horizon is my favorite artist. Um, and screw it. I'm gonna do my favorite artist for the first song because I want to, right? I could have done the more strategic approach and do a Taylor Swift song or a Beatles song because if you want clicks on a songwriting video, all you need to do is put either of those in the title, and it's a massive cheat code to get like way more views. Which is why some songwriting channels that I won't mention, but some are essentially just like they just go back and forth. Beatles, Taylor Swift, Beatles, Taylor Swift, Beatles, Taylor Swift. Oh, and then John Mayer comes up once in a while. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You could even say it's good strategy. But I don't want to talk about those things, right? I want to, at least at first, with these, I'm going to be more passionate. I'm going to know more. I'm going to just be more excited to talk about this stuff if it's songs that I enjoy. And again, we construct the episodes in a way that whether you like or even know the song is totally irrelevant. Right? We're just sort of using it as a jumping off point for learning purposes. Right? We're taking one specific thing from different elements of the song. Like, oh, here's a lyric writing thing we can learn. Here's an interesting music writing thing we can learn, or melody writing, or whatever it is. So even this episode is actually what Roy is talking about applied. And the first time I read this email, I remember thinking that it was 100% right and that I thought it was something obvious. Right? I thought it was obvious. And then I realized what a fool I am. It's not obvious because I get tons and tons of comments and emails and even conversations with people, including people who have been successful songwriters. There's this almost obsession with chasing what's popular right now. Oh, everybody's doing 80s sounds right now. Okay, so I have to do it. Or oh, I got to know what Taylor Swift's done next cuz she and whoever else is in pop is, setting the industry standards. And by she, I mean her producers, right? Like which is a real thing, right? Producers kind of try to keep one up each other, and I get all that. But what a soul-crushing, terrible way to write songs, in my opinion. For many reasons. One is, eh, if you try to do what everybody else is doing, then you're probably just going to be A, behind, and B, probably a second-rate version of somebody else. And that to me is the ultimate. We all should want to avoid being a second rate somebody else. This is why I don't think we should obsess so much with like, oh, Beatles. Beatles are my favorite, and everything I do is through the lens of the Beatles. So then you're gonna be a second-rate Beatles. Who wants that? We can listen to the first-rate Beatles. So nobody wants a second-rate Beatles. Same with Taylor Swift, right? Uh, like, we don't need every single 15-year-old girl to decide she wants to be Taylor Swift. In fact, we don't want that. We don't want that many Taylor Swifts. I want 0 Taylor Swifts, okay? A lot of people want 0 Taylor Swifts. A lot of people love 1 Taylor Swift. But even a lot of the people who love the 1 Taylor Swift don't want a second much worse Taylor Swift. And it's not even some I don't want you to mishear me. I'm not saying nobody could do generally what Taylor Swift does better. I think tons of people can and do what Taylor Swift does better. She's just more popular because popularity has it's never been, the best is the most famous. It's just never in history. Like it's almost never that way. I was talking to my songwriter friend, and we just out of curiosity, I was like, so to me, I'm like, probably all of the greatest songs ever written, nobody's ever heard. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Of course. Right. This is a guy who was paid lots of money in the 80s to be a professional songwriter. And his immediate response was, of course. Like this is of course this is true. So I'm not saying that you can't, talk about some of the same things Taylor Swift is and do it better. I think you can. But we don't want to be chasing what somebody else is artistically. We want to chase what we like and chase sort of our own artistic identity. And that is going to come through. Our inspirations are going to come through, right? So he talks about how he really likes Badfinger and the Raspberries and mentions the Beatles. So those influences are going to naturally come through because in this story, Roy is essentially saying that he's chasing writing music that he likes, and at least to me, it doesn't sound like he's saying, I'm trying to write Raspberry songs. He seems to actually go out of his way to say, I don't specifically say like I want to write a Badfinger like melody or whatever. No, instead, it's I chase a certain sound that I like, or I chase, writing in a tone that I really like. Essentially, I try to write music that I like. And of course, some of my favorite artists are going to come through in that. Right. I've never sat down and been like, let's try, maybe never is a strong word. I've never been like, I'm going to try to write a Five for Fighting like song today, or I'm going to write a Breaking Benjamin like song today. No, but like in some of my songs, you will hear that because they are big influences. So that's going to happen. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's a good thing. Every artist ever is some sort of combination of their own ethos, their own artistic identity combined with or augmented by all their different sphere of influence, essentially. So, yes, if you listen exclusively to, uh, you know, hard rock stuff and somebody else listens exclusively to country and you had the same sort of core artistic identity, one of you is going to lean more country and one's going to lean more hard rock because of your influences kind of pull you that way. Totally good, totally fair. So I think the big takeaway here is that Roy is right on the money, and don't be obsessed with chasing what's popular or what you think people will like. We've talked about this before, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But a lot of people chase what they think people like, and nobody knows what people like. We can try, but nobody really knows. Even artists themselves have no idea why their fans like them. Evidence? Almost every artist that has ever sold out, or sometimes artists that like just go really downhill, and everybody who liked their early stuff doesn't really like their stuff anymore. And you're like, what happened to them? And oftentimes, artists bragging about, we feel like this is the best album yet. And I get you always have to say that about the latest album. But a lot of times it's like, no, they really believe it. And they'll even say things like, "Oh, we know the fans really like, heavy guitars, so we try to go back to heavy guitars, blah, 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 blah." And a lot of times they just miss the point. It's like, yeah, it's not like your fans don't like heavy guitars. It's not like that's not a part of what they like about you. But if you think the core um trait that you had that your fans liked was like, "Oh, I like heavy guitars, bro." Some fans maybe, but a lot of times no. There's probably something deeper, something more meaningful that people were attaching themselves to, that they really loved about your music. So even artists themselves usually don't know why people like their music. So the idea that we would know, oh, this is what people like about music, in a very specific way, like, oh, I need to make my melody more this, and oh, the reason people like Taylor Swift is this. Like, we don't know these answers. So my advice is just pursue your own artistic identity and write music that you wish was made, because you're going to be more passionate about it. You're not going to burn out, or at least you're not going to burn out as much. It's going to be more fun. It's not going to crush your soul. It's going to make you an actual artist who's pursuing what you believe to be beautiful, what you believe to be good, what you believe to be nice, pleasant to listen to, or epic, or whatever it is you like in music. That's what's going to excite you. And that's therefore probably what you're going to write best, what you enjoy. So do that. Don't worry about chasing what's popular. Roy is right on the money. Hey friend, if you found this helpful, then something else you'll likely find helpful is my free cheat sheet on 20 different ways to start writing a song. One of the easiest ways to avoid writer's block and make sure our songs don't all sound the same is just to change up how we start our song. So if you're ready to write your next great song, be sure to check it out at songwritertheory.com/free guide.